What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Star Wars Explained. I am so excited and thrilled to have a first time guest on the show today. He is the author of one of the greatest Star Wars books ever written, and it just came out again with the annotated versions. So please welcome Matthew Stover to the show, as well as Tom, the editor of many of the Star Wars books that we get to read.
Well, hi.
How are
Hey,
you both
Alex.
doing? Well, I'm just going to dive right in.
Mhm.
Matt, in your author's note, you talked about having a panic attack after
Oh, yeah.
signing the contract to write the novel. If you could go back, what would you tell your past self now that you know that you have written one of the most well loved Star Wars novels ever, to the point where other Star Wars authors say it's their favorite Star Wars book?
I think it's awesome. I guess the only thing I would tell myself is yeah, it's gonna suck for a while, but it'll be awesome when it's done. Because it wasn't there. I don't think there's anything I could have said to myself that would have made it less stressful. Because I just, I was just feeling my way. I started out with the concept as I described in the piece, but how it was actually going to work on the page, I had no clue.
Did the stress help in a way? Like
No,
if you had gone back? No, not at all.
no, no. It's just the opposite for me. Some writers are like that. They need to kind of get keyed up on and adrenalized by the pressure. It's just the opposite for me. I need to be able to relax and have a little freedom to play.
Now that we're 20 years later, the anniversary edition is out. How does it feel for both of you to see it on the New York Times bestseller list 2 decades later?
Well, it was a shocker for me. I can only imagine it was a matter of considerable satisfaction for the editorial staff.
It was also, I think, a bit surprising and shocking as well. It's a more common thing that like special or anniversary editions of books are appearing on the New York Times bestseller list in more recent years, but like it's still not a super common thing. And so I definitely was surprised by it. Somebody on the team just like texted me. They were like, number 15. And I had to ask them, like, what are you talking about? I don't know what number 15 was, because I had no frame of, like, wasn't just imagining at all.
Yeah, I got an email from Lauren, I think, and then a call from my agent. Hey, Matt, I have news for you.
The news travels fast. When people hit the list, the news does travel fast.
Well, what was it like to go back and write all of the annotations and expand on a story that fans know and love and have loved for 20 years?
Well, it was kind of interesting. Mainly, the main feature of it really was that it was the easiest work I think I've ever been paid for, because I didn't have to make anything up. That was yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun. It was really fun working with Tom.
It was really fun. I think the hardest thing we had was there were a couple of situations where we had to figure out, like, wait a minute, did this thing actually happen? Like, going back to
Right.
like 2003,
Yeah.
2004. It's like, wait, did this episode of the Clone Wars like actually, or this piece of the Clone Wars or this piece of other storytelling exist before this book or in line with Matt's
Right.
manuscript, so that we were in line with like your recollection of like, did I take inspiration
Right. Did,
from this
did
thing
I did
or
I steal
not?
that from this guy or this guy?
Exactly. Exactly. So we had to do a little bit of fact finding around that. That was probably like the most creation that we had to do beyond
And
just
and honestly, they
building
they had to.
animations.
We have never been able to entirely confirm exactly who was present at that story meeting with George Lucas. My recollection is completely wrong. Just in September, I got to spend some time with Jim Lucino, who was sort of my Star Wars guru, and he reminded me that he had been there for that story. He was there in the room.
I mean, I think I can understand that. Like, if you're in a room with George Lucas, it's just him, and then yeah,
and,
other people
and
were
all of the
around.
voices in my head. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny too, because when you were writing that note, I wanted to go back and look through all the information I had and talk to all the people that I had access to about like, okay, what do you guys remember? Just in case there was any like, okay, great. Matt remembers this piece of the puzzle and this person remembers,
Right.
we'll recreate the whole thing. And no one else that I talked to recalled or remembered that Jim was there. So it's this funny thing that,
I don't know.
But I have no doubt that he was there.
I don't either. I
It was
mean,
pretty funny.
he was my guy. He was probably mostly there to hold my hand.
And everyone else that I talked to, they kind of similar. They're like, I remember Matt was there, and I remember George was there, and I remember I was there. And then like, but they couldn't really remember anybody else. It's kind of a funny thing, and I think it works well in your note that like that is your memory of the event. So even if obviously Jim was there, it matters that like your recollection of who was there is sort of just as valid as like the truth of it.
Well, yeah, because right. That's the reality I live in.
The footnotes were truly great. I was so impressed, and I was looking forward to learning little facts about the creation of the story. But I was surprised at how it came off as reading like a story within a story, where you referenced previous footnotes and kind of built upon one another, and then it all built up into the whole Sun Dragon crisis at the end. So what is the process for going through and choosing your annotations and the stories that you want to tell and crafting that?
Well, a lot of the bigger ones, the ones that have the longer annotations, are things that Tom actually noted for me. Said I think people might want to know something about this.
Anakin's butt.
Yeah, Anakin's butt, for example. Everybody wants to know about Anakin's butt. But yeah, so there were a lot of them were just stuff that was brought to me by Tom and or his team. But other stuff was just me going through and going, "Oh yeah, I remember." I remember that.
And when we talked about it, like, so something that in reading other annotated books, just in doing a little research around, a lot of times annotations are these kind of very small, very like, here's why I picked this word, or here's about this scene, but they are kind of very individual to just like the moment or the footnote or the call out or whatever it is. But in talking to Matt, and especially once we decided to use footnotes instead of like margin call outs, when we decided to use footnotes, we suddenly realized that we had way more space. So Matt could actually talk about something for more than 10 words, like because of the way the margins work. And because of that, I think we talked about this idea of like, you do have space then to tell a longer story, or to tell a story, as you noted, Alex, like over the course of the book, especially when there are certain techniques or certain elements of the story that repeat so many times that Matt can sort of just like, okay, I've actually got like several hundred words to talk about the, this is how it feels, or like this is motif. So let me just like piece that out of the story rather than finding just the like, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever, and using that as the only space we're going to talk about it. It just gave us so much more room to kind of like let the annotations breathe. And in telling longer annotations, Matt got to just explore way more depth than if I was telling him like, hey, you've got 15 words.
That wouldn't work for me. I don't do so well with length constraints.
We no one will ever see this, but we actually did mock up your annotations if they were in the margins, the way that many annotated books do. And the text of the book was about this narrow, and then like it was kind of almost like a 2-column like newspaper thing, and it looked awful. It was terrible, and the book was like twice as long because of how we had to fan it. It was never going to be an option.
I'm curious about the process of creating a book like this, Tom. That might be more for you, but going from the start and you kind of compiling ideas to present to Matt.
So part of that came from one of the first honest conversations that Matt and I had about this whole project, is that this was Matt's first time doing any annotated project. This is also my first time doing it. So neither of us knew what we were doing. And so we're just like, all right, we'll figure it out together. And so it was coming out of that conversation, we figured that the best way to get started was that I would go through the book first and almost annotate it with guides, prompts, questions, tidbits, etc. And I compiled those from like all my own reading or thinking about this story over the course of 20 years, but also just from like conversations that I'd either had or heard people had about the book. So like, honestly, like Alex, like things that you have talked about on your channel, conversations I've seen on social media, conversations I've had with people at the booths at Comic-Con and stuff where, you know, this book just naturally comes up over time, and just kind of remembering back to like the kinds of things that people bring up, like the Anakin's butt scene, you know, like, you know, all those other things, and using all of those to just provide these like markers for Matt of like, some of them were very specific. Some of them was like, hey, would love to know like where did the, you know, these like the dark is sort of beginning parts come, like where did this motif come from? But sometimes I honestly just like circled a sentence and I was like, tell me something about this. Like anything you want. Like, you know, like I don't even care really what it is. Just like tell me something about, you know, this thing, whatever you can recall. So it was just a matter of kind of going through and doing all of that, but then also breaking them down and making sure that we had a plurality of types of annotations, right? There are some that are like, here are great Easter eggs from other Star Wars books where I was pulling influence from, but some of them are about the craft of writing, and some of them are about like Matt's own relationship to Star Wars, and then some of them are about like what he remembers about that point in time in writing, and having like all these different versions of annotations that are, it wasn't just like one thing. And that I think helped lend that sense that Matt is almost sitting next to you telling you these annotations as you read, rather than some other form.
That was really that I was hoping for, because I'm not annotated editions are largely an academic exercise. I'm not an academic. I'm not a scholar. I don't know anything about that stuff, but I know a little bit about, you know, telling a story. So I can do it in little tiny footnotes too, I guess.
Yeah, the book absolutely reads that way. Like it just felt like a friendly, like, let's walk through this story together. Was there anything that Tom brought you, Matt, that you were like, really? Like you want to know about this specific thing?
I can't remember being surprised by questions.
I can't remember a prompt that I left where when you sent back the draft that you had, you know, followed behind and done your first draft of Annotation. I can't find anywhere you had remarked like, I don't have anything to say about this. There were a couple of places where ultimately you and I decided like, we've sort of covered this thing, so we had some duplication. But yeah, I can't recall a conversation where you were like, I don't know why you asked that question. You know, there's nothing here.
What was it like for you, Tom, to go back through the book first? Like, you know, you were a fan and now you're getting to go at this thing like a professional, but clearly your fandom helped you pick some of that stuff out.
It did. Again, like I had no idea what I was doing, which is sometimes freeing in that like, well, if I don't know what I'm doing, I might as well just start. Like, let me just do it. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. But like, I don't know what I don't know. So, but it was really, it is the first time that I've read the book cover to cover in probably several years. Obviously, I've like read pieces of it or come across pieces of it a lot, almost pretty regularly, even without trying. But reading it cover to cover was the first time I'd done so in a number of years. And I remember being struck once again by like, this isn't just like a unicorn among Star Wars novelizations. This is a unicorn among the like 60-year history of film novelizations. There just is not another film novelization. There just isn't. I went and looked, like I went and tried to find another one, but there really just isn't. And so I was struck by that once again. And then just struck by how many things, you know, because in my head I had the like, okay, you're going to circle like, this is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker or forever. You're going to circle the Anakin's butt thing. You're going to circle like, you know, I already knew, but then the like, the parts of the book that I go through, I'm like, I'm circling every line on these pages, like every single section I am circling. That to me it was super gratifying to go back and do. And it gave me just like a refreshed appreciation for the book, because I had, again, sort of put it aside as a reading experience. It had become just like a thing to quote. But the interesting thing about a piece of storytelling, when you only quote it rather than actually go back and just experience it in full, is you do forget it's the totality of its impact, right? You can remember the individual moments of intensity, but the totality of the experience is something that I really appreciated getting to do, and the fact that I had time to do it because it was work.
Yeah.
Um,
Matt, did you have the same experience revisiting it, going through? You were like, yeah, every single line of this is a banger. I just crushed this.
No, no, not at all. I have a interesting relationship with my own work, because I only write things. I can only write something if I'm doing it in a way that I would want to read it if I were the reader, right? But my tastes are kind of specific, and so most of what I see when I look back is the places where I just didn't quite nail it. But I didn't talk about those.
were you ever tempted, Matt, to ask me if we could like re-edit a scene or something like that?
This Revenge of the Sith Special Edition,
I
yeah.
wasn't going to go that far. I have done that. I have done that with one of my other books. That's another story. But no, but no, it was interesting to me reading the questions. It was interesting to me because there were some things that had never occurred to me that people would be curious about. You know what I mean? There's things that to me seem like it's straightforward. It's just right there. But then I realize it's not. When you're reading this book, you are coming to it with a combination of your imagination and my imagination, right? So there's at least two brains working together to make that story in your head. When I'm looking at it myself, it's only my brain, right? So I'm missing half the experience, more or less.
That's so interesting. I'd never considered that.
It's just weird. I mean, I enjoy rereading my own work, but it's mostly just it's kind of like, oh well, yeah, I avoided doing something stupid there.
Well, that's interesting to think about developing the novel, because like you said, you wrote this before you saw the movie. So at that point, you're kind of mixing your imagination and George Lucas's imagination.
Mhm.
So how did that go? And would your process have been any different if you had seen the movie first?
Oh, I'm sure it would, and I'm sure it would have been a less interesting book to write, and probably would have been less successful as a novel. That's my guess, because I think the constraint. It's because I used to be in show business. My academic training was as an actor. I mentioned that a little bit in
Mhm.
the story, and there's an idea in theater history that some of the reason for greatness in the actual writing of plays has to do with the constraints, physical constraints of the theater, right? You can't do special effects. Things like you have to do everything with language. I think that not knowing what things were going to look like was actually an advantage for me because it forced me to find more interesting things to do, more novelistic things to do rather than trying to recreate images that I've already seen.
What was your experience when you did finally get to see the movie? You mentioned in the annotations you were surprised by Grievous's cough. Does anything else like that stand out?
Well, I was astonished that the opening battle only lasts 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hey, you know, yeah, it was. Yeah, I was expecting it to be a third of the film.
I'm curious, Tom, did you read the novel before you saw the movie?
This one I didn't. Which we were Matt and I were talking about this, and I can recall that I read the Phantom Menace novelization before seeing that, and I had read Attack of the Clones before seeing, but this one I didn't. I can't recall the exact reason, though. I chalk it up to I was in high school,
Mhm.
and so just. But I remember, I think I might have bought it, or at least like had marked down to buy it, and so it was after I had seen the movie once that I went and read the novelization. And then obviously I ended up seeing the film probably close to a half dozen times, I think, when it was in theaters. So I didn't read. This is the one of the prequel trilogy that I didn't read in advance of the film. Yeah, which again, I think I just chalk it up to being a senior in high school and having AP classes / also probably a healthy dose of senioritis, and and hanging out with friends and stuff.
Well, you're going to make me sound like a total loser because I was also a senior in high school and I absolutely read it first, and it's like in the middle of all that same stuff. But like the thing that stands out to me that I remember is being so sad that Kit Fisto went down so quickly in the movie, and just like the duel between Palpatine and the four Jedi Masters. I remember that being so different in the novel, and I loved it. And then I was just like, oh, they're just dying so fast in the movie.
Well, I don't believe in killing off characters quickly if I can avoid it. That goes back to that classical training as well. You look at the everybody who dies in the whole Iliad, the whole Trojan War that has come down to us. They all get a little like character bio of why their death was tragic or whatever, who their parents were and who their friends were and whatever. And I kind of believe in that.
I love that you were dedicated to bringing in elements of the books and the comics to your adaptation, because I grew up with those books in the 90s. I'm curious if you have any personal favorites from that era.
The 90s, it's hard to say. I was more of an 80s EU guy. I was the Han Solo trilogy, Brian Daley. Yeah, Brian Daley was my guy.
That counts. I mean, I'm just like all legends. All of it all counts.
Not just the Han Solo trilogy, but the radio show, which was on the air when I was in college, and was awesome. That was genuinely great Star Wars program, and yeah. So that's I actually one of my books was one of my Star Wars books is sort of an homage to Brian Daley. I was trying to recapture some of that energy in a more modern story.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk about your other Legends books. How did writing Traitor and Shatterpoint prepare you for writing the Revenge of the Sith novelization, or were they just totally different beasts?
They were totally different beasts. I had never done a novelization. It's like writing a book from somebody else's outline. But no, the real preparation, and actually, as far as I'm given to understand, the reason I was asked to do this project in the first place was that it gave me an opportunity to spend a lot of time thinking about the Force, and especially about the dark side, because it looms so large in the Skywalker saga. And that's the only answer I ever got from Del Rey or Lucasfilm about why they chose me for this project is they told me that they thought I had a certain touch with the dark side.
That's true. Actually, I went and asked, and that's essentially, I got more or less the same answer in everything I was able to find about why they chose you, or one of the reasons that they chose you, aside from just general prowess as a writer.
Oh, of course that.
Yeah, that too. That's helpful. But you're also right, Matt, that like writing a novelization, Star Wars or otherwise, is like just such a different beast from writing even a licensed fiction novel. I think every author that I've ever worked with on novelizations is like, it's not like you have to relearn how to write again, but it is exercising a set of muscles and writing muscles that you just never exercise. It's just only done in novelizations, and it's
you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. It is such a different thing. Even when you're writing, even in relation to like, if you're writing the tie-in to, the TV show or movie that came out, and so there are these pillars of like, well, I know this character has got to be in X place at the end of my story because then they show up in that movie or something like that. It's even way different than that, because you're actually writing them in parallel to what is happening on screen. And so it always ends up as this unique challenge that I think you're almost never ready for until you actually just do it.
Is the editing?
Yeah, same thing with editing a novelization, because you'll see things, you're like, there's an opportunity we could head in this direction, but you're like, we can't do that because the story has to go in this direction, right? And it's not about like, well, the direction in the editing is like, it's better. It's just like, it's just a matter of like exercising different editing muscles, and finding ways to. The editing challenge with editing a novelization, it goes to some of what Matt has already said around like thinking about what can a book do that a movie can't, and take full advantage of how do I let you experience this story in book form in a way that doesn't change how you'll experience it in visual form, but just takes advantage of the kinds of things that a book can do that a movie absolutely can't. And doesn't try to recreate the things that a movie does really well that a book kind of can't, or that a book kind of struggles with. And so that is where there comes these like extra challenges, which there's certain elements of like just the way some of the scenes flow in this book that is an example of that. And if you read any novelization, Jason Fry's talked about this a bunch with the Last Jedi novelization, and the way in which some of those scenes in the Last Jedi, you have like, you know, characters in different spaces who are talking to each other and inhabiting the same space, and they're not. You could do that visually very easily, right? In a book, that's like impossible. And so you find different ways to actually reflect those scenes, because the book will actually be able to execute that. It would be garbled if you actually tried to like translate it one to one, but then the challenge becomes doing that without actually changing the intent of whatever is going on. And that's, again, one of the real successes of this novelization is how much is different from what you see on screen, but it's not actually like at all. It's still exactly in line with the story that's being told on screen.
I think another advantage of having a novelization is that you get to drop little details. You got to do things like name Grievous's ship, the Invisible Hand. How do you go about dropping in like little bits of trivia while also staying true to the spirit and the pacing of the film?
You throw in as much as you can and trust your editors to take out the stupid stuff. That's most of what I did.
Yeah, it's like you look for the places of like, is this taking away from like the pace the story should be moving at, or the focus of the lens? And if the answer is no, great, layer it in and off we go. It's more depth. And if it is, then that's something where you're like, let's maybe not do that.
Do something else.
Yeah.
In the footnotes, you call yourself a trivia obsessed geek at some point, and I would consider myself one too. I'm just curious if you have like a favorite piece of Star Wars trivia, a question or something that's like weirdly sentimental to you.
I don't know. The Star Wars trivia I know is stuff like Mark Hamill does a killer Harrison Ford impression. I mean, does an absolutely dead perfect Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely counts.
Yeah.
I think my favorite piece of Star Wars trivia is just that because Star Wars, because you don't acknowledge Earth in Star Wars, the just plethora of words that you cannot use in a Star Wars book because they are so derived of something that is very specific and earthbound. Obviously, there's things like you can't use the word terrestrial to describe, let's say, like a planet that has like plains and grasslands and stuff, because terrestrial means Earth. And of course, we don't use earthquake, we use groundquake, things like that. But then there's also terms like we don't use footage, because footage is derived from the idea of film, and film doesn't exist in Star Wars, so you can't use the term footage.
And they don't use English measurement system.
Correct. We use metric only, which also then means that you can't use euphemisms or idioms that are using like, the one that pops up all the time is like, he inched forward on the floor, which you're not. I mean, you are describing distance, but you're not really describing distance, right? That's just like a sense of movement. You can't use that phrase because inches don't exist in Star Wars. And there's like a whole bunch of those things. And there's a lot of words that like, you actually have to back up like 3 bits of etymology backwards to realize, we can't use this word because of the fact that it is derived from this very earth-based thing.
I love that. Yeah, that's a very editor-based trivia. That's great.
I keep a very long list and then keep the list of the analogs so that whenever we run into them, I can tell an author, not like, hey, sorry, we can't use this word for this really ridiculous reason. I mean, ridiculous in a good way. I think it's really cool. But like, here's the like 3 alternates you can use.
You had another annotation that was kind of trivia based. You said that you were trying to make 3PO's languages in Revenge of the Sith, that he only knew 3 million at that time, thinking he would have learned more. And they said, no, let's keep it 6 million. You can't do that. That made me chuckle because I remember in The Force Awakens, there was a reference book that said, he now knows 7 million languages. And did you have any reaction that they were allowed to do that in a reference book, that he finally actually did learn more?
This question is the first I've heard of that, so I didn't really have a reaction. I thought it was funny at the time. I thought it would have been funnier if they'd let me stick with 3, but whatever.
I'm on your side. I think you should have been able to do it. Well, thank you both for taking some time out of your day to speak with us. I'd love you both to have a chance to just share where people can keep up with you online. Tom, let's start with you.
Because I work for Random House Worlds and the Star Wars Books team, you can always check out all the Random House Worlds Star Wars Books socials, as well as you can find me on X or on Blue Sky as Darth Eternus. Always hanging around, always happy to chat about Star Wars or publishing in general, because I do work on other things, though Star Wars is my first love.
For me, I'm on Twitter as MW Stover, and on Facebook, and I don't maintain a blog or anything like that.
Thank you again just for chatting with me. It truly is an honor. Revenge of the Sith is one of the best Star Wars books of all time.
Thank you.
It means a lot to a lot of us. So thank you for spending some time with us, and thank all of you for watching, and may the Force be with you.